starting. So the word tantra, from the root tan, to stretch. Incidentally, tentus in Latin, a tent is a bit of stretched canvas, or stretched canvas that provides a shelter. A tantra is, if you add the suffix tra to a root, it usually means a device or a tool or implement for doing something. So you have, for instance, the root kan, to dig. Sometimes you add an inserted I before kantra or kanitra. Kanitra more commonly means a digging tool and therefore a spade. So a tantra means a stretching machine, and therefore a loom. It's the loom on which you stretch the wool that you're weaving. You have this loom in which you stretch the, I keep forgetting whether it's the warp or the woof, the long, the up and down one. You stretch up and down with, there's hooks at each end. So that is originally the tantra, the stretching machine, which you stretch out your wool for weaving. And by extension, this word loom is used as a symbolic word for this, these kind of training practices that one does. And man, for example, man meaning thinking or mind, you have a mantra, which it's been interpreted in two ways. One is as a mind tool, and the other is as a mind protector from the root tra. Both are equally feasible linguistically. So you have tantra, stretching tool, a mantra is a mind tool, and right. so on. Yeah.
That's great. That's all new to me. Thank you.
Right. So I think that was the only etymology I had or outstanding questions from last time round. So we will look at Bodhicharyavatara, verse 32. What I'll do, I'll just read it out, and then I'll call up the text. Varanapi na yuktaivam kahakim varayati chet yukta pratityata yasmad dukkasyo paratir mata. So I'll share screen now and just call up the sorry, something's gone wrong with my screen share. Try again. Here we go. Is it properly shared now? Good. So
yes, it is.
I'm sorry? Hello?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, very good. Good. Thank you, Marco. Yeah, welcome, Paola.
Hello. Nice to see you.
And yourself. Well, we can't quite see you, but nice that you're with us anyway. Yeah, okay, Paola, there we are. Thank you. So, Varanapi na yuktaivam kahakim varayati chet. So what this the previous verses have been talking about resistance to evil. And here varana, meaning resistance. Here resistance to anger. And this part of the Bodhicharyavatara is a series of dialogue, argument, counter-argument. If such and such an argument be raised, what's your answer to that? Well, the answer to that argument is this. So many parts of the Bodhicharyavatara just raise arguments from different schools of thought and deal with those arguments. It's not always entirely apparent from within the text which argument is being put. Rather which school is putting the argument, but there are actually texts and editions. For example, the Skelton Crosby edition in English of the Bodhicharyavatara will tell you which argument is being raised. So if you're interested in whether this is an argument raised by the Advaitas or the Sankhyas or the Sarvastivadins, that will all be given to you in the Skelton Crosby edition. But here, Chet. This verse deals with the argument, well, there's no point in resisting evil because who is resisting what? If you look within yourself and you find no permanent person, no permanent I, and if you're looking at some evil being done, and again you find that it all is emptiness, well, if I'm all is emptiness and the evil that is to be resisted is all emptiness, then what's the point, basically, what's the point of anyone doing anything? So this kind of nihilistic arguments have been raised, and this verse starts to deal with this, what you might call nihilistic argument. We aren't real anyway, evil isn't real, so let's all do nothing. So the argument is put and dealt with thus. Chet, the word chet at the end of the first line just means is, meaning here if it be argued, if the argument runs, that. Okay? Varanapi nayukta, so varanapi nayukta, resistance is inappropriate. In other words, there's no point in doing it. Basically, if it's argued that resistance to anger or evil is inappropriate because who is resisting what, then the answer to that point is given in the next verse, saying it is appropriate because there is such a thing as dependent origination, and there is such a thing as suffering and the cessation of suffering. So the philosophical argument that ultimately when you look deep in, you cannot find any ultimate self, doesn't dispense with the raw, brutal fact of life that suffering exists and that we can work for the well, we can do things that increase suffering. Equally, we can act in a way that decreases it. So back to the verse. Varana api. So varanapi, even resistance, nayukta, is inappropriate. So resistance is inappropriate. Evam, thus, same as iti, meaning thus, if it be argued as chet, if it be argued that resistance is inappropriate, because kah kim varayati, who is resisting what? Yukta, second line, yukta, it is appropriate. Yasmad, because pratityata yasmad, because of pratityata, because of conditioned origination. Dukkasya uparatir mata, which begins by saying dukkasya uparatir mata, because it is conceived, it can be conceived, there is such a thing as the uparati, the cessation of dukkha, of suffering. So I'll unpick this a little bit more. Varna, from the root vri, meaning to cover, and by extension to stop or block. You can see how you get the semantic progression from covering something to blocking it. It's the same root, the same word also means protecting. So we get the vri, and it has come into English.
Are you showing your iPad, James?
Not yet, no. Thank you for alerting me anyway. You did the right thing. Not yet. So the root vri, and I will actually, you've reminded me I should be using the iPad for this. I'll get round to it in a moment. Vri meaning to cover and also to guard or to block. It comes into German as Wehr, as in the Wehrmacht, the defense force. And it comes into English as ward, as in a warden and a guardian. It's at that same root. It also, we find it in English as a weir, and as in a weir in a river that slows the flow of the water. A weir means a blockage, a small dam, a blockage or a holder back of water. So the varana is the blocking or resisting, restraining. So even varana api, varana, even resistance, that is resistance to anger, na yukta, is out of place, inappropriate. It's from our root yuj, yoga, meaning to join. And if something is yukta, it's etymologically the same as our English word yoked, the Latin junctus, joined. If something is joined, it means it's joined in, it's appropriate to the situation. So if something is not yukta, not joined, it means inappropriate, useless, out of place. So even resistance, that is resistance to anger, varanapi, nayukta, is inappropriate. Evam, thus, meaning the arguments just stated, kah kim variety. That argument then supported by kah kim variety. Kah who, kim what, variety is resisting or restraining. And within Buddhism, we've got the nivaranas, which is the nivaranani, commonly translated as the hindrances. Those are things that block you down, that hold you down. It acts as a kind of holding down, restraint, the nivarana from that same root. I will now call up iPad. So let me just, sorry, got to turn on. Bear with me while it turns on. Here with you. Getting the technical bits working. Good, here we are. So this is the root uvri. Not to be confused, there is another homonymous root, vri, choose. One is to cover. The root vri, by the way, meaning to choose, once you get the word vara, meaning choice, that's back to the very point we were discussing earlier with Barry. The same root as the Latin volo, I wish, and the English word will, wanting. In Sanskrit and Pali, it's come to mean choosing. So the vri, to cover, and by extension to guard, protect, restrain. And the word I was telling you about, the nivarana, from that same root, that's the one that's described as, translated usually as a hindrance, the five hindrances. So, and vri can make a verbal noun as varana, just like vid can make vedana, passana, and so on. So varana. So even resistance is inappropriate if it be argued thus. And there's so many words to be filled in here, because in between those two lines, now you put the answer to that point is yukta pratichita yasmat dukkhasyoparatir mata. So it is appropriate because of conditioned origination. Because of conditioned origination, it is conceivable that mata, literally, it can be thought. In other words, it's within the bounds of possibility. It can be rationally conceived that there will be an uparati of dukkha, that there will be a cessation of suffering. So, line 2.
James, could I just ask, what's the present tense of that root, vre?
Oh,
How does it go?
yeah, it's hang on, I've done a note on it with it's Vrinati and Vrinoti can be class 5 and class 9. Let me just, I've done a note on it actually in the explanatory glossary, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe veil is connected, velare in Italian, to put something to cover, velo.
Oh, yes, Marco, of course, yes. I'd forgotten about that. Thank you. So, un velo, velare, in English we have the word veil, V-E-I-L. Either, you know,
Also, envelop. Perhaps.
envelop, indeed, yes. Yeah. And to develop means let it to come out of the shell, to unfold, let it be uncovered from its shell, to develop, sviluppare. So, sorry, here we are. Here we are. Oh, yeah, here we are. I thought, yeah. So it's, we'd want it to be Bharati, wouldn't we? But here we are. It's a class 5. So it's Vrinati. Sorry, Vrinoti is a class 5. What am I talking about? Vrinoti is class 5, Vrinati is class 9. There are numerous verbs that can be done, that can have both. It's the one where you get the no or a na inserted within the root. And a similar word I'll deal with now is janati. Let me just come up to that. Or I could even fail to give you the grammar of that one. Yeah. It's these, I know we haven't dealt with these in detail in this class. It's what's known as a class 9 verb. Just so that you all know the word janami, I know, janati, he, she, it knows. Let's give you a mini lesson on class 9 verbs and the slightly irregular verb janati. So, root jna, cognate, as you know, with our English word know, where we still write the etymologically derived k, but without pronouncing it. So we write kno, but say no. So jna janati. Is there anybody present who is able to explain the form janati from the root jna? Ah. Within a few minutes, you will all have a totally clear grasp of the slightly odd conjugation of this irregular verb. Only a little bit irregular. Okay. So what happens is it's a class 9 verb. That means that within the root, you put in a na. So you've got the root. Oops. Occasionally getting a bit of trouble with my iPen. Still fully charged. It was working a moment ago. What's gone wrong with it? It's not operating. if it's going to play up, I might. Come on. Let's have another go. A bit further down the page. Sorry, pen is playing up. Resort to manual backup. 1 second. One more chance. So, okay, nya might just be working out. So root nya to know. It's from that same root we get sorry. Abandon attempt. It's not working. Okay, so you should all have now full screen with the white bit behind me. Okay. So nya no. What happens with class 9 verbs is that into the conjugation of it in the present tense you insert a na, and then you insert the personal endings. Mi, si, uti. So normally you would expect to find for he, she, or it knows, you would expect to find nya, the inserted na for the class 9, and then the ti. And that would make jnanati. And that would be the regular form for a class 9 verb. What happens with this particular verb? It's a little bit irregular because in the present tense, the ny drops. Irregularly, it drops out. So that is how you get janati. Janati, janami, janasi. Oops. I've gone down such a rabbit hole, I can't quite remember how we started now on this. What led me down to
I was asking
Janati?
I was asking about the present tense of vre.
Sorry, I've forgotten to put. I'm not having a good techno. I forgot to put my headphones on. Can you say again, Barry? I couldn't hear.
Yeah, I was asking about the present tense of the root vre.
Ah, okay. So you were. Now, the present tense of the root vre it's a class 9 verb. So you get oops, sorry, chaotic today. Just get the rubber. So you get the vre, root vre. He, she, or it chooses is therefore that's perfectly regular for a class vrenati. And because of the subdot, because of the r, this becomes a subdotted n. So vrenati, he, she, or it chooses. It's also alternatively a class 5 verb. which would make it very naughty, just to complicate things.
Thank you, James.
Right. So, verse 2, or line 2 begins, yukta, appropriate, means it is appropriate, or our answer to that objection that, don't even bother to resist anger, our answer to that is yukta, the varana, the resistance, yukta is appropriate. Pratityata yasmad. Yasmad means where from. It also means because of. So because of pratityata, by reason of the fact that there is such a thing as pratityata, namely dependent origination, dukkasya uparati mata. The uparati, the cessation, the quietening down of dukkha, can be conceived of. In other words, it is realistic to conceive of the cessation of dukkha because of dependent origination. Pratityata, the iPad might be functioning again now. Can you see iPad now? Sometimes it functions if I leave it for a little bit.
Yeah, it works.
Okay, very good. Many of you, possibly all of you, will have come across this expression, pratitya samutpada. Many of you may have encountered it in Pali, where the Pali form of it, it's very common in Pali, it's the word meaning dependent origination or dependent co-production. In Pali, sorry, pratitya samutpada. Samutpada, Pali samutpada, means, well, uppada on its own means the arising, the coming into being of something. It's from our root pad, meaning, basic meaning to go, as a verb. It's cognate with our English word foot. So the foot is that whereby you go, you walk. So the pad, utpad, literally to upgo, is to arise, to come into existence. It makes the verbal noun utpada, arising. So we have the central Buddhist doctrine of, in Pali, paticca samuppada, in Sanskrit, pratitya samutpada, meaning often described as dependent co-origination, the samutpada, co-production, co-arising, co-origination. So pratitya, meaning independence, so in, new word, dependence on, dependently upon, hence dependent co-origination. Pratitya means, it's an absolutive verb, used adverbial, means in, or depending on something, by way of dependence on something. Is there anybody here who has a completely solid and firm grasp of the grammatical origin of the word pratitya and what it means and why? Did I say something funny, Chris? Okay. It's actually hopefully I don't say too much that's completely useless, but this might be particularly helpful to understand this paticca, such a commonly used word in Buddhist circles, conditioned co-production. So it's from our nice old root "e," meaning to go. And it's the same word from which we get our Latin word ire, to go. And in Latin, he, she, or it goes is just it. Latin, it means goes. But in Pali and Sanskrit, that becomes eti, it. And it's from that word, that it, that we have exit, out go, so exit. So the e in exit is the same e as the Sanskrit and Pali root e, meaning to go. So every time you see the e of exit, think, Vedic root e, to go, exactly the same meaning. Now, prati is a verbal prefix, and it has the meaning of back. Pratyeti means to go back to somewhere. Pratisarana, something you go back to, you fall back on, have recourse to. It has a range of very, very subtle meanings. I mean, subjectively for me, it's the most subtle and interesting of all of our wonderful Sanskrit and Pali verbal prefixes. Can also mean kind of with regard to oneself, or can just mean against. So against, not in opposition, but for example, as in leaning against a wall, for example. And accountants, they have their double entry system. You have an entry and a counter entry. Well, the old Sanskrit and Pali speaking accountants would have called it the entry and a prati entry and counter entry in the books to balance the debit and credit. So prati plus e, literally to go against, but against in the sense of to lean against. For instance, that same word prati would mean to lean against a wall, for example. By extension, it means to depend upon something. It's a necessary condition for the existence of something. So pratitya means if A is dependent upon B, so A pratyeti B, that means B is a necessary precondition for the existence of something. So the word pratyaya, the verbal noun of E is aya. So pratyaya, which by sandhi becomes pratyaya, that on which something depends, that upon a leaning on, that on which something leans. It's not exactly the cause of it, but it is something without which something else cannot exist. It's a necessary precondition for the existence of something. So it's the difference between something causes something or is a necessary precondition among possibly other necessary preconditions, but a necessary precondition for the existence of something else. That is the pratyaya, meaning literally the leaning against, something without which it cannot exist. It makes now an absolutive form, meaning having done or by means of doing something, is prati plus e. And we want to make the absolutive form having done. We want to add twa, it's ending twa, veditva, having said, kritva, having done, gantva, having gone. There is a rule in Sanskrit that where you have a prefix in front of your root, you cannot use toi, you have to use ya instead. So gum toi having gone, but agamya having come. So prati I ya. So far, so good. There is yet another rule in Sanskrit that where you add ya to a root ending in a short vowel, you have to insert a t. So you now get t gets inserted. So you get prati plus itya. And then you have to merge all this now, pratitya. So prati iya, prati itya, pratitya.
James, just a quick question. What is the toi? So the prat is the prefix, the e is the verb. What's the toi?
Okay, toi at the end, it's grammarians call it the absolutive or the gerundive. Absolutive is a better term. It's the form of the verb means having done something. So, where in Sanskrit and Pali you get a sequence of actions in succession. Somebody did A, then did B, then did C. In Sanskrit and Pali, having done A, having done B, then he did C. So these forms of the verb, having done so and so, if it's a simple root, you say toi. So gum becomes gantwa. Drish, to see, drishtva, having seen, after having seen. So this twa ending, it's the same in Pali, this twa ending is added to the root, the bare root. So we get, for example, root gam, plus twa, you get gantwa. With it m changing to a n before a t, that's wrong with anything. Gum, you don't say gum twa, but gantwa. And you get the root drish, to see, plus toi. You get drishtwa. Again, by a regular rule of Sandhi in Sanskrit, where you get a sh followed by a t, becomes a shta. They both become retroflex. That's a standard rule of conjunction of consonants. So drishtwa, drishtwa. When, however, you add this twa to kind of any root in the language, sometimes in the language, sometimes with an e in the middle. So vad, you actually add an e in the middle, but it's the same word. Vaditwa, having said. Han, to kill or to strike. And twa, so on. Also, hatwa, you can drop the end, but you can have both. Now, there's a rule that strictly applied in Sanskrit, but optional in Pali, that if the root has a verbal prefix in front of it, you cannot add twa, you have to add ya instead. Exactly the same meaning, no distinction of meaning whatsoever. So, for example, anudrish, you see, is to contemplate or examine, to see along. So you say drish drishtva, but you have anudrishya. Gam gantwa, but agam, to come, you can't say agantwa, you have to say agamya instead.
What does gan toi mean, James? Sorry.
Gantwa would mean having gone. So just having done one thing, did something else. Gantwa, having gone.
Are the other words gam and e interchangeable, meaning to go?
There are very many circumstances in which they can be regarded as interchangeable. There are some cases, numerous cases, I should say, where by usage one or the other is used. For example, you've got from gam you get the past participle gata, gone, and you get the tathagata, literally, thus gone, literally. From I, you can get ita, meaning gone, but you'd never talk about the tataita or tateta. It's not huge. It's always tata gata, because in that particular phrase, it is gata or gata. There are numerous cases where they would be interchangeable. Just the simple word gacchati, eti, nagarang gacchati, going to town, nagarang gacchami, nagarang emi, I'm going to, you could say either.
Thanks, James. Thanks.
But in this, for example, in this, where we have this particular meaning of depending, one thing, depending, leaning against, relying on another for its existence, I've never seen prati gacchati. It's always pratieti, pratyaya. So in this particular collocation, it is always the prati-i. So they're sometimes interchangeable, but when you get to the specialized meanings, generally not. So pratitya then means it's the absolutive form, which means having lent, having relied on, having lent against. But it's used adverbially here. By that I mean this. We've got the samutpada, meaning the arising, the coming into existence of something. And how does it come into existence? It answers the question how. It's a pratitya samutpada. It comes into existence by or in reliance on something else. So it's a verb form, but used adverbially, mean by means of reliance, by means of dependence, or in dependence on something else. So, for example, if somebody you see is walking along with a book in his hand, so he is walking with a book in his hand. In Sanskrit and Pali, you would use to say, pustakam adaya gacchati. Pustakam adaya means literally having taken a book, he is going. So the adaya, in English we can say he's walking with a book. Here we say having taken a book, he's going. So it's this adverbial use, the manner of doing something. So it's not always just a sequence of verbs, but often to describe the manner. So pratitya samutpada arising how? Arising dependently upon something.
Could you actually simply say with a book, using which tends to be ablative?
Instrumental you'd use. No, if you
instrumental.
Probably no. It could be a bit misleading. You say if somebody is walking with a book in his hand, if you say pustakena charati, now that would sound very odd. It would sound as if he was using as a book in order to help him walk. If you, for example, you say danda, a stick, dandena charati, yeah, that he's walking with a stick. In other words, by using the instrumental, you mean using a stick to help him walk. That would be the correct use of the instrumental.
Yeah.
But so we've got various different meanings of this word "with" in English. For example, walking. You're walking with a stick, and you're walking with a friend. The prepositions "with" have slightly different meanings there. If you're walking with a stick, it means you are using a stick to help you walk. If you're walking with a friend, you're walking in the company of a friend. You're walking there, and he's walking along next to you. You'd actually express that in different ways in Sanskrit. Just said walking with a stick, you mean using a stick to help you. Dandena charati, but you'd say mitrena saha charati, walking with a friend. Use the word saha, meaning in the company of.
Yeah.
If, for example, you said dandena saha charati, walking with a stick, that would give the very, very odd imagery of you walking along and your stick is walking along next to you. So because the saha meaning in the company of, rather than using it to help you walk.
James, the sam in Samutpada, what does that mean?
Okay, right.
And just one other quick one. This pratitya samutpada, is it fair to say that it can be summarized as causes and conditions?
It can be summarized like that, but with a slight caution, because the pratyaya, as I said, the pratyaya means it's often translated as cause, the cause of something, but that is a loose translation and misleading. It doesn't mean that something has actually caused something else. If something is the pratyaya of something else, it means it's the necessary precondition to enable it to exist. It doesn't actually cause it. It couldn't happen without it, but it's not the actual cause. So, and
Yeah. That's quite an important refinement.
It's very important. So that is why I resist the translation of cause for pratyaya. More strictly, it is a necessary precondition of something happening. So this pratitya now, having something as a necessary condition, it can make an abstract noun, pratityata, which might be translated as conditionality. And that's the word that we have here. We got it here. Pratityata. Just to add a further layer of complication, this particular word here, pratityata, I think, well, I know that that's the only case that I can remember of having seen an abstract noun made out of an absolutive like this. This is treating pratitya as an important central technical term of Buddhism, the conditionality. So pratityata means the fact of there having been a pratyaya for it. So conditionedness, conditionality. So yes, sorry, Barry. Yes.
No, sorry.
Chris.
Without wishing to open a rabbit hole.
Well, a rabbit hole. I think almost the entire lesson has been a rabbit hole. Carry on. We're deep in the warren now, anyway.
Just very quickly. It's very interesting. This refutation of I believe this argument that there's no point in resisting evil or anger because ultimately the absolute reality is empty.
Yes.
In other words, there's no inherently existing self and no inherently existing threat. It's a skeptical position. I just this morning I was just looking at the usual challenge to a skeptical position like this is that it's irrelevant to some extent because it doesn't take into account the practical consequences. I mean, if you're not going to resist evil or you're not going to resist anger, then what are you going to do in a behavioral sense, in a practical sense, on a day-to-day basis? So all these sort of arguments, and there are arguments currently raging on the internet about whether or not we're living in an ultra-sophisticated universal computer simulation. It's all the same. It all comes down to the practicality and the behavioral consequences.
In a concrete sort of way, although the self might be an illusion, and things in the environment might be appearances. If what's an illusion of oneself walks in front of the appearance of a buzz, then what's the illusion of oneself still gets squashed with all the consequences.
Well, exactly. And this brings us to the question we have what we might call conventional reality and the ultimate reality. The fact that an ultimate reality may exist, or we might know it to exist, or believe it to exist, or be confident that it exists, it does not mean that our ordinary conventional reality doesn't exist. Otherwise, well, we go on being as evil and as horrible as we like to each other, that in fact it does have very serious consequences indeed, because our actions on the ordinary conventional reality, these ultimately shape whether we are able to lift ourselves up to understand the reality beyond. I mean, the Buddhism, and equally we're seeing we see is the same in the Bhagavad Gita, that yes, we have the paramartha, literally the further meaning, I mean the ultimate meaning, the ultimate reality of things. But you know, in order to make that a real part, to lift ourselves up to that, we have got to be not only attentive, but we've got to be hyper attentive to our moral behavior here and now, and particularly towards other people. I mean, Buddhism stresses so much, and so does the Bhagavad Gita as well, and Hinduism. You'll be able to say more about this, Alan, but Chris, sorry, that you neglect it at your peril. And if you say, well, nothing really matters, behave as we want, then you sink in the huge morass of evil, which becomes more and more real for you the more you sink in. So basically, this is just summarizing in two lines. It's a false argument to say, well, because these are what we see around us now is just appearances, therefore it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter very much, because there is such a thing as suffering. And unless we work to put an end to that suffering for ourselves, and more importantly for others, we will all remain stuck in the illusion. The whole point of the entire game is lifting ourselves out of the illusion. But in order to do that, we have to act and behave correctly, starting right from where we are now. Otherwise, you just come an amoral nihilism.
Or a sense of pointlessness, which can lead to self-destructive behavior like drug taking or even suicide directly.
Exactly so. So because there is a higher reality, doesn't make our present illusory reality any the less real. It is real for us here and now, and we act accordingly. And if we don't, we act at our very great peril. I mean,
I read an interesting metaphor for that. It's seeing the things around us, the world, in the same way as icons on the computer screen. The icons aren't actually what's going on in the computer, but it's only by the icons that we've got access to the computer, and they need to be taken seriously. We can't simply put an icon in the bin with impunity, because we lose access to what it represents. And this idea was like that the world that we perceive is an evolutionary simplification of the quantum reality that allows us to interact with whatever it really, in quotes, is. I thought that was interesting to share that.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point, that the proportion of what is actually going on immediately in front of our eyes, the proportion of that we actually need to survive is some tiny, tiny amount, and we're evolutionarily programmed to see what's necessary to survive. The mistake is to think that what we see with the senses is all that there is. Okay, that's what we've got now, and it's why we have survived as a species. But on the other hand, okay, so far so good. It's necessary and it works. We know it works because we're all here talking to each other. But the moha, the delusion, is to think that that's everything. And that's why we are all upon this path to lessen the moha, to break through. So all of this argument is getting summed up in a couple of lines by the brilliant Shantideva. So yukta, it is appropriate, it is the right thing to do, to resist anger, to resist evil. Yukta pratityatayasmat, because of pratityata, because of one thing causing another, one thing leading to another. Dukkasyoparattir mata. The uparati of dukkha is conceived or conceivable. So this uparati, the cessation. Have I dealt with the nowadays? Let me just call up I seem to have done a note on it in my glossary. Uparati, the cessation of something. Sorry, I'm opening up a wrong screen. Here we are. Yeah. It's from the root ram. Ra, and by extension ram, and it gives us the original meaning is being quiet or still, and then by extension it means desiring something. And the Greek, eros, which we have in English, erotic, is actually from that same root, and we have the word rati, meaning taking delight in something. And those of you who've driven in Wales will recognize the arav, meaning slow. We can slow down now. I love reading the road signs. So arav now, slow down now. You'll see written in Welsh on the roads. That's same with the ram to rav. And it's the Ruhe in German, and the English word rest, as in the sense of having a rest. So,
James, the trouble is when you are driving in Wales, though, with bilingual road signs, particularly if there's a lot going on, it's a lot to take in. I'm just simply, I'm from Wales, but I'm not a Welsh speaker. There's an awful lot of information to take in these bilingual road signs.
There is an awful lot of information to take in, and now that, of course, they're putting Welsh on top and English underneath, by way of just kind of nudging the superiority of Welsh in Wales.
It's a very, very heated issue, actually. The whole thing.
It is a rather.
Be very careful how you talk about these things in Wales.
Yes. So if I put a step wrong, I'll just plead that both my parents are from County Cork, so I stand well back from this argument. But yes, it can become a rather heated issue. So from arav, so ram, so uparam, literally to slow up, which actually means in English we tend to say slow down, but ultimately it means the same as these things. So the uparati, the calming up, they say in Sanskrit, so the calming down, we'd say in English, meaning here the cessation of something. Those of you who chant the precepts in Pali will recall the Veramani, you know, Panatipata Veramani Sikapadang Samadhyami in Pali. So the Viramati and Upaviramati, from which we get the noun slightly irregularly formed, don't worry about that now. Viramati, to rest off it, to desist from something, to stop back from it. So it has more the idea of ceasing and desisting to do something. That becomes Veramani. So Panatipata Veramani. It could also have been Virati, Veramani. They're, you know, just variations or variants of ultimately the same word. So here, instead of Uparati, it could have had Virati with exactly the same meaning. And Virati, then, as I said, it's just a variant form of Veramani, as in the Panchasila, the five precepts. So Mata, it's from our root, we were just discussing a moment ago, man, meaning to think, from which, you know, the same root from which you get the Latin mens, and the you know, which we have in English as mental, and it's the same word that has come in via the Germanic line into English as mind. So the root is man. So just as, hang on, let me call my pad again. Hope my pen is cooperating. Is it? Yeah. So from just as we have root gum, add ta to make the past participle, you would expect to see ganta, but in fact, the N drops out, so you have gata. There are several roots ending in a N, where the N drops out in the past participle. For example, han, to kill, makes not hanta, but hata. Man, to think, makes not manta, but mata. So mata, mentated, minded, therefore it means can be conceived of, thought, reasonable to think about it. So the feminine form mata. So what have we got here? The uparati, the cessation, dukkasya, of dukkha. Mata literally is thought. In other words, it's something that can be reasonably contemplated, is the idea. How about translated here? Can be conceived. It's reasonable to think now that there is such a thing as the possibility of putting an end to dukkha. Why is it possible to think that it's possible? Because of pratityata, because of conditionality. If we within ourselves remove certain causes or conditions for suffering, we remove the suffering. That's plain logic. If something relies on something else to exist, kick away that prop, it no longer exists. Because of pratityata, we can consciously take certain acts that remove the preconditions of suffering. Because this is a fact, we can therefore conceive of, or reasonably imagine the possibility of, the uparati dukkasya, the cessation of suffering. So Shantidev is bringing the argument back from the amoral, nihilistic, might as well die now attitude of the first. We're all going to be dead anyway one day, so why bother about anything? The answer is there is suffering and there is a way out of suffering. Just because we're all going to be dead one day does not exonerate, does not lessen our need to minimize the existing suffering, and equally to minimize the suffering of others.
Yeah.
So
Actually, it's a pragmatic, isn't it, response to skepticism.
I suppose it is, yes. And the idea that, well, just because there are two levels of reality, it doesn't mean that our ordinary everyday level of reality isn't. Occasionally, it appears rather important to us, does it not? So all of these ideas are well condensed in just these two lines. I was almost at the beginning of this session, I was almost thinking, how this is really terribly dense and abstruse, and the way it's expressed in the language has really condensed it down the way it's expressed in the language. I was thinking it was going to be maybe a rather boring and dry session, but it has turned out to be exactly the opposite, for me anyway. So I think we've got time. I'm going to have to finish fairly promptly within a couple of minutes after 3 this time. I have to shoot off. So can we just have, let's have a recitation of it. Shri Animala. We have not yet had the pleasure of hearing your voice at all, if I remember correctly, during our session. Would you like to recite this this verse for us? Please do, Shri Animala.
Varanapinas kakim varayati chet yukta parati yata yasmad dukkasyo yasmadu dukkasyo parati meta. Parati meta.
Say uparatir mata. Uparatir mata.
Uparatir mata. Meta.
Yes, uparatir mata. Yeah.
Uparatir mata. Yes.
I'm just wondering whether you've been looking at this line. In fact, what you need to do.
No, I'm reading the Devanagari.
You're reading a Devanagari. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, here we've got this rather long, all joined together in one word. This is the Yasmadukkasvoparatirmata. Is there anyone else reading it off the Devanagari? How's your Devanagari coming along, Chris?
Up to a point I can do it, James, but I wouldn't actually attempt to do so. I'd use the Roman.
Right. Okay. Well, now that you're on, Chris, would you like to recite it?
That's a setup, James.
Okay, it was a setup.
Varanapi yitna yuktaivam kaha kim varayati chet yukta patit yata yasma dukayo parati mata.
It's dukkasyo paratir.
Dukkasyo parati mata.
Okay, right. And that, of course, is the sandhi of dukkasya. I'm highlighting here. Sorry. Dukkasya uparati becomes dukkasyo parati. By standard sandhi, the a joining with the u. Just remember, this last word, the chet. You actually pronounce the short chet. Remember, in Sanskrit, the a is invariably long. So chet. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, then, so we'll fit in 2 more for the 2 I can see on my screen. For Barry, would you like to have a go?
Yeah. Varanapi na yuktaivam ka kim varyati chet yukta pratityata yasmad dukkasyo paratir mata.
That was very, very good. That was very good indeed. One point, comparing the way you did it with the way Chris did it, you say kah kim. you said,
Yeah.
which was correct. Chris, when you pronounced this word kaha just then, on its own would be kaha, with that shadow ah at the end. Kaha. However, when it's immediately followed in, oops, make that go red. When it's immediately followed by another word within the same line, you don't have the shadow vowel. You have the shadow vowel if the word stands on its own or at the end of a line. But here, Varnapi Nayuktaivam, end of half line, beginning of the next line, it's kahkim. You wouldn't say kahakim, say kaha at the end of a line, but just kahkim. You don't have the shadow of vowel if it's immediately followed by, okay. Right. Okay, and finally Madeline, and then we can wind up.
I would like to try read it from the Devanagari as an exercise.
Well,
Yeah.
Badante,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Varanapina yuktaivam kaha kim varayati chet yukta pratityata yasmad dukkha syo paratirmata.
Okay, very good. You're looking that you took that straight off the Devanagari.
Devanagari, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I have to train myself.
Well done.
Sometimes.
Well done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mabruk, Mabruk.
Thank you. Shukran, shukran.
And, Marco, you have joined us. Would you like to recite chant the verse for us?
Thank you. Sorry
please.
for before I was in the street.
Okay, not to worry at all, Marco. And just pause there for a moment, Marco. I don't know whether it's the setting or whether you're in some magical place, but we can see your face, but everything around is black. So it's if your face is floating in the black void. It's quite impressive, actually. Like even a face in a horror, not that you have a horrible face, but like a face in a horror film, just the face surrounded by black.
Strange.
Okay.
I'm going to move afterwards. Varanapi nayukta ivam kakim varayati chet yukta pratityata yasmad dukkasyo paratirmata.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got to 3 now, so I will better wind up here. So thank you all for joining me, and look forward to seeing you 2 weeks hence.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you. Thank you all. Bye. Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao. Ciao.